Hello, and welcome to Temporal Horizons Summer Podcast. Please enjoy the show. Welcome to Temporal Horizons Productions Summer Podcast, a talk show where we dive into the captivating world of theatre and multimedia productions. Whether you're an avid theatre enthusiast or someone looking to explore the cutting-edge world of art, technology, and creative productions, this podcast episode is your backstage pass to learn more about this industry and the people behind it. I am your host, Harry Fitzpatrick, and today we have an exciting episode lined up as we shine the spotlight on a talented vocal and acting coach who was most recently performed in the critically and commercially successful immersive everywhere produced show Peaky Blinders: The Rise, where he was both a performer and voice captain and voice care on the show to support his fellow cast members. His other work includes Oh, What a Lovely War, The Old Man Coliseum, playing the tragic central character of Winston Smith in the New York-based Aquila Theatre's touring production of 1984, and has also performed in ancient Greek epics and Shakespeare for the stage and screen, along with performing in the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic ceremonies. We would like to welcome Reece Richardson. Reece, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Many thanks for coming on. How are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. It's been a nice day, just relaxing in the sunshine, enjoying that. And yeah, sort of doing a bit of life admin today and cracking on with, we're doing some research actually on sort of different breath practitioners is something that I'm quite interested in at the moment. So that's kind of what I was doing today.
Nice. And would you like to tell listeners who you are and what got you into the industry?
Sure. I was originally born in Burton upon Trent in North Staffordshire, and then I went back to where my family originally from, in North Yorkshire, and we grew up in a very small farming village, and I think what I felt very lucky about growing up around that part of the world was there's a lot of space, and you're very much in touch with kind of nature. And growing up in that area, it's a very healthy environment in terms of like the air that you're breathing, the people that you're meeting generally tend to have a slightly slower pace of life than in the city, which was always something that I wanted to have as I was growing up. So for me, I kind of always had my eye set on London, and or working abroad, in kind of a more urban centre, I think. So then I went through high school. It was good. I struggled a little bit. I think as a lot of performers are, or a lot of creative people, there tends to be a lot of questions asked that can be uncomfortable sometimes for the teachers. But I was very lucky that the teachers that I had, I think, helped to funnel my excess energy and slightly chaotic nature into something a little bit more creative and practical. So kind of music was my real way into the industry, and into being a creative person. So I started to learn string instruments, mostly guitar, double bass, and was very fortunate enough to be able to kind of take that abroad. Went to places like Canada, America, Europe, and played over in those countries, which was amazing. And then I sort of discovered through a fantastic drama teacher that I had called Carl Hansen, I discovered my love of text, and he kind of introduced me to classical text in a way that was accessible for me, because I always used to think it was very heightened, and for people that were, for want of a better word, very
RP?
Yeah, exactly. So a more kind of stereotypical RP background, and that was something that he quite quickly dismantled. He was from Australia originally, and he said, no, we can make it accessible for not just you, but for a lot of other people as well. And actually, I think that really sparked an interest in me. And then we kind of looked into more dense text, things like Carol Churchill, Simon Bond, Sarah Kane, a lot more kind of heavy, dense text, and how to find the light and shade within that, so the contrasts. And then I applied for drama school after taking a year out to work, because I couldn't afford to do the first year. So I had a year out working in a pub, which was great. You meet some very interesting people in North Yorkshire, very, very, some opinions good and some very contrasting. And so it gives you kind of an interesting world view, I suppose, or of what people can be like. And then I applied for a couple of drama schools, and I got into the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. And that was then a 3-year BA honours in acting. And then from there, graduated agent and kind of worked my way through the industry. My career so far has mostly revolved around so classical theatre, and as you'd highlighted, so, Greek drama, but then more so contemporary theatre and kind of film and television has sort of come in more to my later career, as I'm kind of into my 30s now. So yeah, that's kind of I suppose a brief-ish overview.
Nice. And also building from what you were saying there as well, like I think as well, just growing up in a more sort of remote area and having that countryside and all that, just it gives you that sort of the freedom of your imagination to sort of explode and explore. And also obviously you don't have many people around, so you can be like just the freedom to be silly or make mistakes when you're sort of playing without being sometimes judged. And as you said as well, just that not having that fast-paced energy there, so you can, when you go into obviously into a city life like the London one, would you say it was kind of more of a sort of not a culture shock, but just the first time that going there, did you quickly sort of adjust to the lifestyle? Was it more sort of like just learning as you go?
I think you're spot on, actually. That it really did feel like a culture shock. Certainly that first year, I struggled quite a lot. I found it a very fast-paced, very overwhelming, very overstimulating environment to be in, especially kind of coming from somewhere that was a very different pace of life. But I then quickly enjoyed it for what it was. It was a different thing, and as I gradually kind of adapted to it, the people really made it for me. So the people that I was with at Central, really, it really made a community, and that community has been an incredible support network for me, I think, as I've gone through my career so far. And there are two friends of mine in particular, Patrick McBrearty and Stefan Dunbar, who are both actors, and they're from Ireland, and we lived together in Kilburn, and they really grounded me and gave me a great sense of playfulness and joy. And they were a little bit older, not much, but they were a little bit, and they were a bit more experienced and calm. And I think they taught me a lot, and we're still good friends to this day. And they bring me a lot of joy. They're superb actors, and what's interesting about them as well is they come from a very rural. Well, Patrick comes from a very rural part of Ireland, and Stefan similar, very different landscapes. But there was a shared love, I think, of nature and space, and we sort of carved out a little niche of that in kind of North London. But I love the city very much. There's a wonderful diversity and acceptance in London that I don't think you get many other places. And I think it really, for me, has become somewhere that I've fallen, very deeply in love with. And the culture here, you do get in places like Manchester, or Leeds perhaps, but in London, it really feels like you can kind of very much be yourself. And I think I've reached the stage where I've been able to find, particularly through the voice work that I do and the kind of breath work alongside my performing, I found I've been able to create that space internally as well. I know that sounds a bit odd, but working with relaxation, working from a place of trust and calm, and being able to listen to the other performers that I'm with, or listen to the people that I work on with voice and acting coaching. It's that's kind of been the biggest lesson, I think, is finding that space to both listen to yourself but listen to the other person as well. I think creative people are particularly good at doing that. I think very lucky.
Yeah, and as you're saying there as well, it's like you just having that sort of balance and experience just to help you keep you grounded, and also vocally as well, like the control of breath, because like when you do go on stage, obviously even if you're very experienced, it is still a very nervous thing, and when you are having to do a lot of things or approaching material like Shakespeare or with ancient Greek drama, which has that certain tempo rhythm that you've got to fine tune in, so that way it makes it both accessible for you and for the person that is watching the production or listening to it. Maybe they're able to find that rhythm that helps them to understand the story, where even if they don't get all the words entirely, they can still follow like the understanding gist of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think you're hitting on the rhythm aspect of the text, particularly when it's, particularly if it's verse or if it's heightened text, and there is a rhythm to it. Obviously the iambic pentameter in Shakespearean verse, kind of that following that 10, the 10 beats, and then how the variations on that work. I think as a musician as well, that really lends itself to unlocking the sense of the text in that way. But it's also about not being beholden to that. It's not getting trapped by the sort of textual analysis part of it. It's about going, right, okay, well, this is what's happening in this sentence, and then as long as I can bring that to life authentically and truthfully, whilst playing with the rhythm, whilst kind of going, right, like a bit like when you have a piece of sheet music. So say for example, it's like, I don't know, Mozart or something. That music was written in that specific way to make that specific tune. Same way that like viola, it is written in a specific way, or Rosalind, or Hamlet. The way that you then choose to play that is what makes it your interpretation of that particular character. And I think that's why the classics are still very relevant, is that even though they were written sort of 400 years ago, or over 400 years ago in the case of Shakespeare, or longer for the Greeks, 2,000 years in some cases, they sort of strike on something that's very human. And I think that human condition and how we interpret that as an individual person, whilst understanding that others have done it before, it is for me what makes classical text quite exciting. And that was sort of my way into it, was going, I don't want to do Rory Kinnear's performance of a specific character, or I don't want to do, you could pick Ian McKellen's or whatever, or David Suchet, like I don't want to mimic that. I need to rediscover it. The my Hamlet, or my Rosalind, or my Lady Macbeth. Do you know what I mean? That, I think that's key. And it's not about ignoring and like throwing all of the stuff away. It is really valuable, but it's kind of when you come to rehearse it, you come to play it in performance, whether it's on screen or on stage, you let the work go, you trust the work, and then connect with the breath, and then speak from a kind of truthful, connected place. And the relaxation work is a big thing for me. When I was at Central, I was so tight bound because a lot of my background was kind of rugby, or very physical, and a lot of that tension had built up unknowingly within me, which then became quite difficult to be flexible and playful with. I find it very frustrating, and that I couldn't sort of access the kind of the full range of the instrument of the voice. And then through the work of Claudette Williams, who is the head of voice at Central and is now the head of the BA Honours Acting course. You know, she was instrumental in that journey for me, and I you know, I think without her, I think I would have not necessarily investigated the voice with kind of a lot of playfulness and joy, which is definitely the way that I work. You know, the material can be very heavy, or you know, I take the work very seriously, but I don't really take myself seriously. And I think, as Judi Dench also says about that as well. And for me, that's a wonderful thing. You know, not taking it too seriously. It's a play after all. You know, and you can dissect it and make it academic, which is great. And there's a world for that. But when you're in performance, you know, you kind of want to make it live and fun. And then when you do go to dark places, it gives you room to make choices. You're not just kind of, Iago isn't the villain all the way through. He's not played the villain. He is, or they are. They can be so much more than that. They can be charming and kind, but then also what they do is incredibly evil. The betrayal of Othello is horrible, but you know, he's the friend throughout. It gives you room.
Yeah. And he, as you're saying in there as well, it's like, it's in that word, play, like to play with the audience, play with their expectations, or like, as you say, with characters where they're sort of categorized into that vein of the villain. So you'll sometimes get people that just might play in as yeah, with a moustache twirling, or a sneer to the audience when the character's not looking. But even as you're saying, there are moments in the script when you see the character has a sense of humor. Like, I mean, going back to, as you were saying, like Rory Kinnear, when I saw like his Iago for the National Theatre's production of Othello in 2013, 2014, with Adrian Nestor as the titular Moor, and he had that sense of like just playing it as somebody you'd probably meet in a pub, or somebody that you feel that is truthful in that world that the team are making of the army base, of somebody that has a relationship with like the soldiers and with his commanding officers.
Yeah, and you know, it's not to. I'm not saying, you know, that like the moustache twirling isn't right. Like that absolutely be a valid choice. But I think you said, you know, when you're looking at a character like that, that is an archetypal sort of villain. But there's so much more than that. They're not. There is more nuance to be found there, and I think you know, playing Iago like that to somebody, you could just meet them down the pub. There, you know, they could be they're your best friend. You never suspect them. It then actually lends credence to what Adrian Lester is doing as Othello, and trusting this person implicitly throughout. So for me personally, if I'm, as an audience member, if I'm sitting there going, clearly that person is evil, why are you trusting them? You know, that for me becomes what I then focus on. Whereas if I'm going, do you know what? I can see why I can see why they're trusting them. I would trust them. For me, that makes it much more dynamic, and it's a very gentle way of doing it, because you just kind of give yourself more choices. And I think for me, when I'm working either in performance or whether I'm working, you know, with my clients, the thing that I love to kind of do is give as many choices as possible, because then when you're working with the director, when you're working, you know, with your other actors in rehearsal or on you know, or on set, you can give them choices that they can then play with, and you can find out what works and what doesn't. I don't really find that terms like right and wrong are particularly helpful when working in a creative way. I find what works and what doesn't work much more useful, because you know, it could be the right choice, but it's not necessarily the most useful one for this moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like it doesn't match with the journey of the character, like, or whatever the tone of the play is and what the tone of the production is. Like, you could do something which really works, but it doesn't quite work for this particular moment when you factor in like the given circumstances of the scene.
Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly it. So, and when we were rehearsing for Peaky Blinders: The Rise, it was very interesting playing one of the Italian mob, and sort of been the right-hand man, Georgie Sewell, of the, you know, of the gangster Charles Darby Sabini, who is the kind of head of the Italians. And I think what I found interesting about playing Georgie was you've got a very, very violent, dangerous character, who is effectively a blunt instrument. You know, he's kind of the right hand person of a mob boss, and is. But obviously, you know, that's not that the character that is being played is there very much to kind of host and to welcome the audience in, and the audience have to feel comfortable. They've got to feel like the story is being told. You can't just go in at them as if you were a, you know, a real-time mob boss or mob, you know, gangster hitman. It wouldn't work. So the two, we kind of had this great double act, myself and Angus Brown, who played Charles Darby Sabini, where you had Sabini, who very much would be the sort of big host, the showman, the person that, you know, he's very talkative, high energy, high intensity. And then to counteract that, you had Georgie, who was the other Italian, who's very calm, quiet, polite. And so for a lot of that research, I actually watched things like The Sopranos or Goodfellas, you know, The Godfather, that kind of very Italian charm and welcome when they take you into a room, and, you know, you never get out, but you've gone in there willingly because they're very polite and they're very kind to you, which also counteracted quite nicely the kind of rough and tumble of the Peaky Blinders that they had, and that was very kind of raucous fun, whereas the Italians were kind of more sort of
controlled.
Exactly, controlled, yeah. And I think the world that we brought to life with that, you know, with the kind of characters of Phyllis Robbins, you know, Daisy Winter Taylor played as, you know, this incredible singer, but there's an edge too. It's that high society, but there's something else is going on in the background, but it's not really ever, it's never thrown at you. It's just there. It's just kind of in the background. And the characters like Pearl, Sinclair, you know, the Americans, they come in, they're very sophisticated. There is still an air of real danger and kind of violence. You know, it's played brilliantly by Cat Jones Burke and Harriet O'Grady. You know, they're great characters. I think that's the fun thing about being able to do a show like that, where it is immersive, because it's more of a blend of film and television and theatre. Is very close to your audience. They're kind of almost the camera. They're kind of with you, and they're playing. So you get to explore those subtleties, I think, slightly more maybe than you do in sort of traditional pros arch theatre or traverse theatre, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and actually leads into one of my questions, was how you got involved in the production, both behind the scenes and as a performer. What was the process like of how it sort of came from the initial rehearsals to all the way of the final performance?
It was, for me personally, I kind of knew that I wanted to do the job when I first walked into the audition room. I know that sounds a bit trite and so, you know, who doesn't want a job when they walk into an audition room, right? Otherwise they wouldn't be there. But it was more the feeling that I got when I walked into the room from that first audition. I saw Tom Maller and Eleanor Vos, who were the director and the associate director, respectively, and there was a real focus, but an openness and a playfulness as well. That to me it was really how I like to work as well. And I kind of went, these are two people who are really pushing towards the top of their game. You know, they know what they're doing, and this is going to be a fun room to be in. And then when we did the recall sessions, Kieran Mortell, who played Arthur Shelby, he was in as well. And we not only did the scenes where Kieran read in, but also did a kind of a mini fight call, because my character does a very physical 1920s bare knuckle boxing match at the end. So it was a really kind of fun way figure out how that relationship would work. And I loved working with Kieran, and that kind of never changed. You know, he's a consummate professional and a superb actor, as are the whole cast of the show.
Yeah.
I think Tom and Eleanor have got a real talent for casting not only a talented bunch of people. Don't know how I got in there, but I'm not joking. but, yeah, but also a really lovely group. And when we were doing the rehearsals, we had about 6 weeks in total to create the show, which is a longer than normal rehearsal period. But I think it was an excellent call because it allowed us the time to really familiarize ourselves with the characters and to get really in deep relationship with the character, and also how they fit into this world and how they relate to the other characters as well. Which you don't normally get. It's something that I like to do anyway, is to delve quite deep into the world of the character, what they would think about things that aren't necessarily in the script. So so
it's like brewing in the back of your subconscious. And also, I was gonna say as well, so I think with those weeks, obviously you had for the creative team to factor in, like with COVID restrictions at the time, and obviously because when I went to the show like the 2 times, like it's a very close, very intense show, and it's for a few of the actors that are playing characters that obviously everybody within the public has got a very clear image of, like with the Thomas Shelby, with Polly, Arthur, and other characters like Sabini. So it's like, I think that's the challenge as well. Like you want to pay tribute to them, but as you were saying earlier, with when you step into the role that another actor's played, you don't want to just do just an imitation. You want to find a way of making it your own, but still paying tribute to the foundations.
Yeah, completely. And I think for me, Craig Hamilton as Tommy Shelby, you know, Kieran Martell as Arthur Shelby, Emma Stansfield who played Polly Gray initially, and then Ivy Corbin, you know, Sam Blythe as Alfie Solomons. You know, they took, you know, Jimmy Bryant as Al Capone, you know, and Elliot Rodriguez as Isaiah Jesus, you know, Isaac Beachy, John Shelby. You know, I could go on and on. Like the whole cast is really phenomenal work. You know, you had Lucy Turner as Ada Thorne. You know, these iconic characters that were really are world famous. They took aspects, I think, of what was useful for them from the work that had been done on the TV series. They then looked at the historical characters and or other aspects of Stephen Knight's writing within those characters, and kind of created them anew. So they became the next iteration, in a sense, the same way that your Hamlet is different to mine, in the same way that it's never going to be the same. They never tried to imitate, and I think that for me was the thing that was spot on with those choices that the actors and the directors made. It was interesting because my character Georgie was a real life person. Georgie Sewell was actually a real person, and the kind of cobblestone fighter was a moniker that he got back in the 1920s. And my neighbor actually upstairs is he's a writer and a director, and we were chatting out by the bins, funnily enough, because I get on very well with my neighbors. They're really lovely. And he's a Londoner, and he said, I was writing a screenplay on Darby Sabini actually. And he said, I see you said you're doing Peaky Blinders. Yeah. And he said, I was interested how they portrayed the Italians in that, because he said they were massive. He said bigger than they ever portrayed them in the TV set, the London. And he said, do you want this book? So he gave me a book, which was basically an account of kind of the life of Charles Darby Sabini and Georgie Sewell. And then and Alfie Solomons pops up as well. And the three of them used to go drinking in the Griffin pub in sort of near Clerkenwell. And these incredibly violent people. And a lot of the material was exceptionally useful and helped us to flesh out the world of those particular characters. But some of the things we couldn't use because in some ways you can't go around sort of beating people up all the time.
Yeah, and
not in a stage show.
obviously want to say from the audience perspective when I saw the scenes with your character Capone and Sabine as well, it's like that sort of tension where you it's not real, but just suddenly how quickly the beats and the tension and it switches to, you're like, Jesus Christ, like when he suddenly out of nowhere gun comes, or the minute you hear Sabine call Capone Scarface, and you're like, you just feel, and a credit to the actors as well, because it's like as you're saying, taking real life people, and it just, that's the thing, just you're playing to the energy of the room, but also find that balance towards making the audience go into the situations that you need to, because like performing it 300 times, you need to, like, what would you say to any performer is the best trick to do something, as I say, in 300 performances, but still have that freshness from the first night all the way to the last night?
There's a couple of things for me that I tend to try and do. I always try and subtly, ever so slightly, change something really small each time I do it. The blocking remains, as it needs to. The lines remain the same. I'm not sort of suddenly whipping something out that the director's going to go, what on earth is that? Where did that come from? But for me, it might be just the way that a certain word is stressed, just something slightly fresh, approaching it and really letting go of everything that's gone before, breathing, being relaxed, and just going, this is the first time I've ever heard this person say this line, these words to me. And also trusting not to know what happens next. So I'm trusting that because of the work that I've done, that textual analysis, that all of the rehearsal work, you have to, I really try not to live in that sort of prefrontal cortex heady way, and just really, drop down, center it, trust it on the breath. And I think that's Anthony Hopkins had an exercise where he used to read cards of his scripts about 120 times. He'd read the script 120 times, he'd read the card, and that process of repetition, familiarization, that when you're in the moment of anxiety, stress, performance, if you allow the breath to do it, you will find the line is just there. Because I work on the audition panels at Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. One of the things that when we work with applicants who are in the room with us, it's a very stressful environment, and it's really, it can be very intimidating. I know, because I was there, doing it myself. And I think there's a lot of sympathy, a lot of care and love for the people that put themselves through that. And one of the things that when we're doing our sort of preamble talk to the applicants, we say, if you forget a line, forgive yourself. Don't worry about it. Just breathe. Go back to a line that you remember a few lines before, and then 9 times out of 10, you just run straight back into the speech because it's there. A lack of preparation is difficult. I think it's difficult to work with that as a performer. Certainly when I'm approaching a job, for me, I almost over prepare a little bit, so that then the director can say, work less, don't work as hard. But for me, yeah, so being concisely, you asked, what advice would it be? Approach it as if it's the first time you've ever said the words. Really listen to what the other actor's giving you. If they're changing something slightly, you need to adapt and change as well. Prepare so that you can just be in the moment with the other person, because that's where it's really exciting, where you're not thinking about, oh God, is it my line next? No. What are you saying and not saying right now? That's what I'm interested in, because then the line will come out of that, And if it's good writing, or if the work has been done well, it will authentically it almost can't be anything else other than the next line. If that makes sense. It's a bit convoluted, but yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes as well, with like being from myself from the director's perspective, sometimes you want to give an actor the material, but at the same time you want them to be free, because you might find someone in a rehearsal room or when you're recording that you didn't think about, that they bring a new context to it. You're like, didn't think of it that way, but let's try it your way. So I think, yeah, it's just having that openness and freedom on both sides, and as you're saying, just being prepared, but at the same time not being too precious or serious, so that if something comes out of workshop or rehearsal, you can just, as I say in Frozen, let it go.
I totally agree, and I think that was, for me, one of the things that was so good about working with Tom and Eleanor, is that they approach the work very much with that kind of, is this going to work for this scene in this moment? Is it working narratively for what we're doing? Love that offer. That's great. We can use that. That thing might not work in this scenario, but let's keep it in the back pocket. They kind of it's a clever way of helping. They helped guide their actors to a place where the choices that they were making made sense narratively, and also made sense to stay true to the character. And I think for me, that's good direction. It's not dictation. I've been very fortunate. I've worked with very good directors where there are, there's not really people that work from that kind of like, I need to dictate to you. You must stand here. You say the line exactly like this, and they give you a line reading. For me, I find that very limiting. And I find a process of collaboratively working with a director super exciting. Because I'm like, you can see things I can't, because I'm in it. I need you to tell me, is that reading? Does it work well? Does it not work? Because I don't know, because I'm in the moment with the other person. I'm only pursuing a need, a thought, an intention, an objective in that moment, whilst listening to the other person. And you need to tell me, does it fit in narratively with the story that we're trying to tell? But equally, we need to try, what works and what doesn't. And for me, in a show with as many variables as Peaky had, I think the two of them worked exceptionally well. Did Tom and Ellen? I think it's real talent.
Well, I mean, the results speak for themselves. I mean, like extensions, sold out shows, and like the very passionate audiences that came, like in cosplay. And I did hear somebody say once that there was a couple of very passionate fans that might have brought an actual gun once, but
yeah, I had to disarm. It was really funny because I've had firearms training in the States, let's say firearms safety training and stuff, and it was really funny. With Aquila, actually, the warrior chorus, and I remember there was a gentleman in particular, because there was a couple of incidents when it happened, but they were very clearly, very plastic guns. They put it on the table with Sabini, and I kind of just went, oh, we'll take that. Thank you very much. You don't put that in front of the boss, kind of thing. But there was one gentleman who came in, and he was very smart, very smartly dressed. And I saw the handle of this replica firearm, and I looked at it and I went, that looks real. That looks like one of the props that we have, like one that's actually very much questionable. And it was just kind of poking out of the side of the left breast pocket. And so I went up to him, we had a sort of a conversation. He was very, very amicable about it. And I sort of relieved him of it and said, we can get it at the end. But I think I respected the commitment, but when I took it off him and felt the weight, I think if he'd have dropped that on the tube, I think he'd have been in an awful amount of trouble. So not for me. Guns are, yeah, they should. Not in a public space, definitely. I think
Yeah,
that
I-
one.
I'm quite I'm quite actually surprised like how he was able to get it from where he went from to the show. It's like,
Same. I don't know if some of the pin badges, I don't know if he was ex-forces or what, but or had he just hidden it in the suit, and then kind of, it was on show more for the kind of aesthetic of the piece. But no, the stage management very quickly took it away and put it somewhere safe, and checked that it was all fine, and it was, it was a replica. It wasn't even deactivated. But it was very heavy. It was the realest one that I saw that an audience member brought in. So we went, yeah, don't want that anywhere near our set. But that's the interesting thing about immersive, and I think
yeah,
coming at immersive theatre as a performer who's mostly been used to kind of more, I suppose,
the separation of actor and audience.
you're really there. And I think what's exciting about that for me is, and for a lot of other performers, I think, who do immersive theatre, is your audience are they're more integral to the story you're telling than almost any other medium that I've worked in. In radio, it's you and the microphone, and it's a very intimate relationship between your voice and their ears and what they're hearing, but it's not really a two-way conversation. It is with their imagination, but not so much, in the way that like a play is, where you're live with the audience there. And television and film, super exciting, but it is, again, it's not in the moment. But immersive theatre, they are literally in front of you, and they become a character themselves if they so choose. Some people prefer just to watch. That's fine. And Tom and Eleanor were very quick to help us kind of figure out what to do in lots of very different situations. And the other actors that were, more experienced in that medium were very generous with their time, and sort of saying, if you get this scenario, you could try this or try that. But ultimately, it's always about the audience, and it's got to be about their engagement with the story. Are they understanding what's going on? Are they enjoying this particular track that they're in? Do they need something different? So I think there's a lot more involvement and intimacy with your audience, which I personally really enjoy. It's about that in all theatre. If your audience aren't engaged, what's the point? You can cry as a performer, but if your audience aren't crying, they're just sat there, they've been sort of cheated a little bit, because you're feeling all the feeling, but they've paid to imagine, or they've paid to feel. You need to help them to engage with the story and feel happy or sad, or
Yeah, I mean, that's like when I saw, like, for the experience I had the first time, when, spoilers, the character has to distract the person that Thomas Shelby's got to assassinate, and obviously it's a very intense moment. I was like, do you need a tissue?
yeah.
Or just asking, you okay?
That Lizzie Stark moment is really quite something. And I think that's amazing that you felt, the empathy was so strong in that moment from you, as as an audience member. You become intrinsically part of the story in that moment, which is kind of amazing. There's not many forms of entertainment where it is so connected. That's what it's like.
And again, like, props to the act, to you and to all the cast, and that, how, as I said, you keep your audiences, make them feel that empathy, make them feel the tension or the humor or circumstance of the moment. Just having that variety from betting, which I actually still have the old 1920s £10 note,
Oh, brilliant.
which I won on the horses. So yeah,
John and I will
and
be pleased about that.
yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, like, admitting it on here, I'm not gonna get a fine for stealing props.
We just won't tell art department.
Yeah, I'm sure they've got a few more printed somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say that. It is. I think ultimately it is the aim of anything creatively, to connect with people, to bring out empathy, to present different options, different stories, and say, how, what would I do if I were in that situation? What would I do if I were in that situation? What would the world be like if that was the real future? Like in 1980, sorry, my dog is sneezing. I don't know why.
It's probably the hay fever.
Yeah, bless him. But like in 1984, when we did that in America, it was very much a case of, that sort of future, what happens if that happens? It's daunting. And I
Yeah.
think there's something about theatre, film, television, stories, in general, in any medium, where it be a novel, whatever, that is very exciting, because it allows you to imagine that you're in an alternate sort of reality or storyline that isn't necessarily the one that you're currently living in. And that then presents people with choices and allows you to kind of walk in other people's shoes and go, as I say, what would I do in that situation? Which makes it a real powerful tool for kind of social change, education.
And yeah, it was actually building into what my next questions were about, how you got involved with, so if I'm pronouncing it right, Aquila Theatre, as well as with the Olympics. Like, as you say, 1984 is, yeah, when you look at sort of like the world as it is, or it could have been back when Orwell was writing it after the Second World War and the beginning of the Cold War, is like the way it's used by both sides of political extreme, like the left or the right, to attack the other. And even I think the more scary form in that is the way languages took away, educations took away, the fact that you just have that sense of like, yeah, you're very careful, very scared to what you want to say, which was a reality for a lot of people living in, say, Stalin's Russia, or in other or in countries like North Korea, with very authoritarian or totalitarian regime. And playing the central character of Winston Smith, what was that experience like, and the production overall, like when it went on, because it did go on tour.
Yeah, we started rehearsals with Aquila in New York, and then kind of went all around the US, but I think we went to about 36 different states in the end, which was fascinating, because you're going to a lot of places that people don't necessarily go. As a British person, you don't often find yourself in Flint, Michigan, or in the middle of Arkansas, or somewhere in the Dakotas. It was a real privilege to kind of go to those places, and see the communities there, and how much they kind of enjoyed artists coming and working with them, and presenting them with these pieces. I think playing a character like Winston was it was a great challenge. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, in the sense that you're effectively playing somebody who is fighting for the right to freedom of expression, to kind of feel. Doesn't necessarily want to go with what the state is telling them to do, and I think that's making it not so much for me. I think I looked at it and I went, this is such a well-known story, and it's so politicized, like you said, left and the right and everyone in between utilizes 1984 and quotes from it to kind of validate their worldview or their kind of political agenda. And so for me, I very much focused on the humanity in it, and looked at what happens if a person is subjected to this absolute control, complete and utter control, down to the double speak, double think. that they know what you're thinking. And I think I was like, regardless of how I feel about that, because I think everybody finds it at some stage disturbing, that level of control. I was like, what happens if this person is, they can't help but be unapologetically empathetic to everything else in the world around them? And so the script that we utilized was one where it kind of focuses in the ministry of truth, when he's towards the end of the novel, when Winston's been captured and basically is being interrogated. And the way that they do it in the play is, we have this one room, but they showed scenes through his life. So the party members would reenact his scenes as a way of torture and say, look, you did this and that's why you're in here, and you did this and that's why you're in here, and kind of over and over again showing the story of 1984, but with my Winston looking at it, looking back on himself and going, these are the incidents of what I've done wrong, quote unquote, but not fully understanding why. And I think that question, why, is a strong one in 1984. Why does it have to be like this? Why is the world so controlling? And that there was a lot of, it was very extreme in a lot of ways. There's a lot of sort of, the torture and I think allowing those moments to exist, but then finding the light and the shade in it. So finding the joy and going, and in a way that contrasts the world that Big Brother is trying to create. It's, it's a safe world because everything goes down this linear track, and it's totally predictable, and it's totally how the state wants it to be. Whereas I think Winston was very enamored with the complexity of life, the beauty of it, the sadness. He wanted to feel, and I think that's kind of how I approached it. Somebody who's intrinsically empathetic and deeply passionate and feeling about things, being told you can't do that. That is wrong. That was how I approached that, because I think that's something that every person can relate to on some form or another, regardless of the politicization of it. I kind of left that alone and let people decide. It's more about the freedom to express yourself, regardless necessarily of what you're saying, but how important that kind of right is for everybody to be able to freely express themselves. Was kind of one of the cornerstones, I think, of my approach to that character.
Yeah, and also building from what you're saying as well, like using those sequences of actors performing your memories is like the contradiction of Big Brother wanting a linear thing, but creating a world of theatre for that character, and also as well like gaslighting, because it's like you're being told it happened this way, but you think, no, it didn't happen that way. And also, as you're saying, just finding that balance between the light and the darkness, because if you're just doing one long straight piece where it's just super serious and that people are just gonna not engage, because I remember seeing a few things in like college or uni when it was during obviously the presidential elections in 2016, and they were just doing it just one straight way, and I'm like, well, come on, there's something else here you can do. Like, you don't want to just preach into an echo chamber or to the converted. You want to engage with people that might vote Republican, might vote Conservative, might vote Labour, Lib Dem, and you want them to be able to just have that universal experience of making them then talk to one another afterwards in the bar or at the cafe of the performance space and discuss about the themes and ideas, the way you go to the Tate or the National Gallery, you look at an artwork and you end up in a conversation with a family member or a friend, and you're like, what is this thing telling you? Well, and that's the thing with art, it's just the subjective nature of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think human beings are very complex and very nuanced. And I think being able to facilitate conversation, communication between, you know, people that think differently, speak differently, experience the world in a different way to each other, is extremely exciting. And for me, I think is one of the things that I love the most about working in the creative industry, is that sometimes it makes people feel uncomfortable. Sometimes, you know, I feel uncomfortable when I'm doing things or seeing things, but change kind of isn't meant to be comfortable, you know. And I think Aldous Huxley's Brave New World is really interesting, because what I found so sinister about that is the everything being so easy to access and being so pleasure focused, so kind of, you know, you are entitled to that, to no pain, to no suffering, to no difference. It's got to be clinical. It's got to be in a similar way to 1984, which I suppose is why they're always linked. They're both very, very, very narrow and linear and very binary and very kind of, it's got to be like that. I think that it doesn't facilitate conversation. It doesn't facilitate seeing the world in a different way, so the way that you experience it. And I think rarely have I seen when people sit down and actually have a conversation and go, oh, this is the way I think, this is the way I think, you know. I've rarely seen it not be at the very least interesting and start. For me, it's when conversation breaks down that I think things deteriorate. And that sort of authoritarianism is scary, because for me, there's no variation there. There's no accommodation. You know, you lose out on the amazing different ways that people can experience life and think about things that you've not necessarily thought about before, and approach things in a different way. Because that might offer a solution to a problem that you've not thought about, because you don't think about the world in that way, or you don't experience it that way. You know, and I think rather than limit people, I think it could become much more exciting. Sorry, I was just muting that so you didn't catch that. I heard the door going and I was like, ah.
Yeah. Or he was just throwing in his hat into the conversation.
Oh yeah, he's very chatty.
Yeah. Anyway, so just coming nearer to the end now. Obviously we'll have a little bonus extra 10 minutes, which will be available through Patreons and other sort of platforms. Is there any advice that you would want to give to like your younger self, or to anyone that's about to go into drama school after the summer, or about to travel, like take the long journey to travel London to London or wherever to go into that audition room?
Be kind to yourself, and be kind to other people. It sounds simple, but it's a very, can be quite a lonely industry in some ways sometimes. And I've never ever regretted being kind to myself or kind to others. And it's finding that love and support and care through collaborating with other artists, trusting other artists, has been a real gift. I think I feel very, very lucky with the people that are around me, that I'm connected with. And when you're auditioning drama school, saying this as much to my old self as to, you know, to everybody else, I think the process is difficult because it's decisions that are not in your hands. If you can be kind to yourself and go, I'm going to trust the integrity of the work that I do. I'm going to do it truthfully. I'm going to work hard. but I'm going to try not to criticize and self-doubt too much, because those are unfortunately natural things that do happen in this industry. I don't think I've ever met one performer who doesn't feel those things. But if you can find some joy, it's powerful. Like, I have my little dog and my partner. I love gardening, I love playing music. I love working with people as a voice coach, as an acting coach, and then when I go to act, because I've got all these different strings to the bow, it's sort of something that's just happening. I think if you can find something that you're also very passionate about that isn't necessarily just about acting, I think that's really good. So for me, it's voice work, because of my own experience in life, not being very well at one point. It really sparked a passion and an interest in that aspect of life for me. For other people, it's different. It could be, I don't know, cars, football, whatever it is. It just makes you a more dynamic and well-rounded human being. So I think that's what I would say. I mean, you could go on for hours, but that joy, being kind to yourself, kind to others, and finding a lot of joy in the work. Make the work really joyful, because it kind of then comes back to you.
Nice. And do you have any, what would you say are your top 3 to 5 recommendation of books to work on voice, as well as where people can find a link to your work as a vocal and acting coach?
So for me, the sort of practitioners and the books that I found most interesting recently, because there's so many on breath and voice, but particularly Patsy Rodenburg's work is amazing, and Cicely Berry, two of the best voice practitioners out there, and they are superb. You can find any of their books kind of everywhere. The Right to Speak is brilliant by Patsy Rodenburg. The Need for Words is really good. That's Cicely Berry, if my memory serves me correct. Don't quote me on that one. Just looking at my bookshelf. Breath by James Nestor, seminal work, really fascinating on the relationship of kind of nasal breathing to breathing through your mouth, and what that can then do and adapt and change in the rest of your body. And if you're interested in the one of the key fundamentals of performance, but not necessarily looking at it specifically from a performance point of view, James Nestor's book's really useful. I find Wim Hof actually very interesting, and his sort of the Wim Hof method book is fascinating in terms of what something as simple as the breath can do to the body, and how that changes physiologically and how that can adapt and things. That's a really interesting piece of work as well. And then in terms of myself, you can find links to my work and how to contact me if you want to touch base and do a little bit of work at www.reecerichardsoncoaching.com. And I'm also on Instagram as well, at Reece Richardson Coaching.
Lovely. And we will have a link to the websites and the platforms and the list of books of where you can find them online to order. And many thanks, Reece, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and chat.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for chatting, Harry. I've really enjoyed it.
Lovely. And as I said, you can find all the links mentioned attached to this episode through the link below. And we hope that wherever you are listening, that you're having a good time and enjoying the summer. Thank you for listening, and we hope you have a pleasant day.